I work in a grocery store and today we had to forklift an obese lady up off the floor because she was too heavy to lift otherwise. What are some of your non-typical workday stories? The police gave us a list complete with mugshots of problem drinkers who are not to be served alcohol. My store was about 3 weeks late receiving the list because of an oversight. Being a relatively small town, several of the problem drinkers, mostly vagrants, began to frequent the store during this time as it was the only place still serving them. We finally get the list and comply to stop serving them alcohol. They are not pleased. So in some twisted sense of logic about 15 of them got high on paint. I assume they were because their faces were covered in gold paint, and storm in the store in an effort to force our hand in serving them. A co-worker of mine attempts to strong-arm them out, with little success, so they start grabbing cases and kicking over displays. The Pepsi truck driver is outside at the time and is witnessing all of this. As they are leaving the store, he cracks open a 12-pack and starts tossing Dr. Pepper at the people robbing us. He nailed about 4 of them and the rest dropped the beer and scattered. He said he used to pitch in HS, and without his intervening we would have lost hundreds of dollars in beer. TLDR bums rushed the store. Pepsi driver saves the inventory by knocking several unconscious with cans of Dr. Pepper. This would make the best Dr. Pepper commercial of all time. A couple of drunk dudes drove their truck into my building. And by into I mean crashed into a brick wall and front bumper was actually inside the coffee room. They both decided to run away on foot, but left their wallets and vehicle registration in the truck. The crash was at 1:30 p.m. They were arrested by 3 p.m. One of my bosses in Vegas was a gambling addict. Sometimes he'd have like a breakdown and decide to take me to the casino while he played video poker. So I'd go find a table game to play, or just go get drunk while he did this. He'd always pay me my hourly rate too. Those were my favorite days. I had a boss who liked to get drinks after long days of work, and would take the 3 of us employees out. Most of the time, he'd buy until we were all S-faced. Sometimes, it went a little long, but none of us would voluntarily give up free booze. Last night I had a somewhat confused, but mostly crotchety, elderly patient who kept trying to get out of bed. She has all kinds of drains and oxygen through a high-flow nasal cannula that is very important for her continued existence. I had her restraints a little loose so she could blow her nose and use the remote. My back was turned for about 30 seconds and I turn around to see that she has removed everything and is standing at the edge of the bed about to head for the door. I rush over and get in front of her to avoid any further damage. Then this completely bald, greenish tinged, chemo, poor oxygenation, 4 minutes and 10 seconds, 90-pound lady looks up at me and punches me straight in the stomach. TLDR. Got punched in the stomach by Yoda. We had a serial pisser at Target. Some woman believed that Target hated her and her people, as she said, and decided that the best way to handle this was to pee in the fitting room of a suburban Wisconsin Target store every Monday evening. I was the lucky fitting room attendant the 3rd time she did this, and had our LP guy lurking in the department all evening to try to catch someone. She pee on a bunch of clothing that I, of course, had to bag up and dispose of. I wore surgical gloves and a surgical mask and plastic bags on my shoes in case of pee, as well as the floor and the walls and the bench. When she emerged from the room with a smug look on her face, the AP guy apprehended her and called the cops. She was screaming about how Target hated her people. Well, when I used to work at McDonald's, one day our Ansel system randomly decided to activate over the fryers, causing a huge mess. We had to close up the restaurant, trash all the food, and clean everything up. When we reopened a couple hours later, we couldn't make any fries until the system got looked at, so that was interesting. We posted signs everywhere and had plenty of asses come in all. Haha. I want some fries. And well, I guess we'll be going to Burger King then. Yeah, we really don't care. Go away. Power outages were fun too. We closed up and got to see angry people come through the drive-thru and people pounding on the doors despite all the signs we posted. I don't know what's so hard to understand about. We have no power. People are morons. That's why. I worked at Best Buy, and if it was early in the day when we lost power we'd stay open, because it was probably going to come back on within an hour or so at the latest. People would come in and get furious that they couldn't demo products with no power. I used to work at the local Days Inn. One time, I was walking the yard cleaning up trash and I see this guy fall out of a second story window. I just kinda looked over, and he was falling. At first, I just stared in AWW. Then before I could ask if he was okay, he goes, whoops and gets up, and shuffles his way back inside. I went to the manager, and we pulled the video up, had a good laugh and then went to talk to the guy. Turns out, he was just sitting there talking to his wife, and he leaned against the screen and fell through. Everybody was okay, and we all had a good laugh after. I was giving a tour to 40 people at my university and my old roommate spots me as I'm talking about a building, interrupts with his hand in the air wanting a high five as he shouts, "Kelly got the abortion, bro." It was free for me too. I gave him the high five. He ran. The group looked blank faced at me and I said he would have been a terrible father. I was working at a TJ Maxx a few years back and while I was folding clothing and tidying up my area, I hear something pound on the window. All the employees immediately got up to see what had just happened and we saw this lady who was lying on the ground, splayed out, like she had run into the window, and at such a speed that her shoes fell off at impact. We were a little freaked out but got her a pillow to lay on until the ambulance came. Next time, don't. If she hit her head on either the window or the ground she could have had spinal damage. If you see someone who may have hurt their neck, hold their head as steady as possible until the ambulance gets there. I am not a doctor. This is not medical advice. I do first party collections for a credit union. If someone is avoiding, we will sometimes have an agent go knock on their door and ask them to call us, confirm they live there. Apparently, a member's spouse did not know about the past due bill. The door knock agent found the member, asked him to call us, and left. Apparently this caused the wife to get suspicious. She found out her husband wasn't paying his credit card bills and had very large credit card debt, and filed for divorce. So I come into work a short time after this, and the member has come into the office and shot our door knock agent in the head. I was working at a gas station in Madison, WI some years ago. The 1st of April came on a Monday, and around 7ish in the morning, all the little go-karts that the parking enforcement people use for the university came to fill up for the day with their motor pool issued credit cards. Well, all the cards expired the last day of March, and that being a Sunday, I guess no one noticed. Of course, I wouldn't let anyone leave without paying for the gas they had already pumped, no matter who they worked for. Their supervisor had to come down with fresh credit cards about a half dozen times, and eventually just gave me his personal number to call him back with after a while. Since he was tired of getting irate radio calls from the parking cops who were super P that I wasn't letting them leave. I like to think that I kept a straight face the whole time, but keeping the entire parking enforcement fleet waiting on April Fool's Day was a whole lot of fun. Typical, oil goes down the pipe to storage tanks or a pipeline. Gas goes to a big flare. Non-typical, oil and gas go to flare, creating a billowing rain of fire. This apparently happened, not with oil but another similarly flammable explosive chemical, at my chemical plant a few years before I hired in. They said it was intense. It was then redesigned so that liquid couldn't physically get to the flare even if all the instrument and engineering controls failed. I used to work as a cashier at a home improvement store, the one with the big orange box. We once had a group of 4 guys come in that had obviously been smoking their fair share of weed. They pulled the truck up right next to the door in an area that is supposed to be just temporary parking while loading vehicles and parked there. 3 guys came into the store while 1 stayed in the truck. The guy that stayed in the truck spent the entire time, about a half hour, just staring straight ahead. The 3 guys disappeared into the store but after a while they came back to check out and all they had with them was $10. As they were checking out one guy asked me if we had any, and I quote, big freaking bags of peanuts. Cause I could eat a whole bag myself right now. They paid for the doors, loaded them up and left. I heard from co-workers that they came back the next day and returned all but one of the doors. Maybe they broke a door and they weren't sure which one would fit. Throwaway account, just in case. Many years ago, I was working the evening shift at a Burger King. Sole guy manning the front register. Guy comes in and does a stick up. Paper bag around gun. Jimmy, all your money. Now take me to the safe in back. Big Ed, a co-worker of mine, was cleaning the fryers out behind me and he heard a verbal go over. Now, he wasn't called Big Ed because he was fat, or ironically because he was short. No, Big Ed had shoulders you could use to land airplanes on. As I go to let the guy back, hey, training is don't fight them. Your life isn't worth it, so I do. As I pass the corner to turn towards the office, Ed's big hand grabs my shoulder and practically ragdoll throws me behind him. As I hit the floor, I see him do the muscle wizard I cast fist, wearing the thick rubber playing with boiling oil fryer gauntlet. Hit him so hard he was unconscious before he slumped to the floor. I don't think I've told this story on Reddit before, but here it is. I was around 15 and worked my first job over a weekend taking ticket sales for a college rowing event at a lake about 30 minutes from my house. Things went pretty easy the first day, with taking people's money and giving them a receipt to park in the parking lot. A few people were upset that they couldn't use the lake and turned around, and a few people were upset that the prices were higher than they were the last time, but I managed. On the second day though, a beige station wagon pulled up in the line and I told him how much it was for his car to get into the lake. Inside the car was a black man and his family with 2 kids around 10 years old in the back seat. He said he didn't care about the event and just wanted to go fishing in the lake. I told him that I was sorry, but the lake was closed and he wouldn't be able to fish there today. He asked if there was any other place he could go fishing. Not being old enough to drive yet, and not living in the area, I didn't really know the area that well, so I couldn't answer his question. I told him to wait and I went to ask the guy in charge. The guy in charge told me the closest place he could go to fish. I asked him if that was right, and he said it was. I walked back to the car and somewhat sheepishly said, "I'm sorry sir, but you're going to have to drive down that road about a mile, and the name of the place is Negro Bar." He kind of looked at me funny and then drove off. TLDR, I told a black family they couldn't use the lake and had to go to Negro Bar instead. At that point, I would have just come back and played dumb. When I worked at Sharper Image, I had a businessman in a suit come in. He was clearly hopped up on coke or speed or some upper. He asked me for a gun safe. Given his state, I had a mega moment, but caught myself before saying anything. I proceeded to help him find the mini safe we had that would fit a gun. He said it needs to be really secure, so his toddler doesn't get into it. GG well-dressed coke addict father. We had a truck dock that was located between 2 buildings. There was a drive and then the dock right next to our building. One side of the dock was a ramp. The opposite side was a back-in dock for the big trucks. We had so many people drive up the ramp and off the dock. Nothing we did stopped it. We could put empty pallets out there. They would drive over them. Sometimes we would come in the morning only to find evidence of some new car having gone off the deep end. I was working in a printing company and we used to open up an overhead door to keep the press room cool. Well, a bird flew into the press room and up into the rafters. It can be a very bad situation to have a bird run through the press. This Mexican guy named Pedro grabs this big broom and touches the bird with it. The bird comes flying straight down and he catches it with his bare hands. Despite the bird pecking away at him, he decides it would make a great pet. He gets a box, puts the bird into it, then seals the box up by tucking the flaps together. When it's time to go home, he puts the bird in the backseat of his car. Pedro and I lived in the same city and took the same route home. I remember driving behind him and then seeing him swerve all over the place. All of a sudden, I see his window roll down and then this bird shoots right out of the window as he's driving. The box had opened up because he did not properly seal it and the bird escaped, flying all over inside of his car. Could have been a lot worse. People hit deer with their cars. Think, oh, free venison, and horse it into the back of their wagons. 10 miles later on the freeway, the stunned deer regains consciousness, replete with flying razor-sharp hooves. I work at a grocery store too. About 2 years ago, an elderly lady drove her car through the front door and hit someone. No one was too badly injured, but the front of the store was pretty damaged. I am honestly surprised that no one has done this at our store yet. The other day, I finished a huge reporting project that I have been working on for a month. My manager actually told me good job and thanked me for getting it done. It was unbelievable. I got a $1 per hour raise last week. Yes. I used to work at an Italian restaurant back in high school as a dishwasher busboy. One night I was pulling both the dishwasher job and busboy job. Supposed to have 2 guys on at all times, but the other guy was stoned and they sent him home. In comes a really fat lady and her friend's family. When I say this woman was fat, I mean she was so fat his stomach spilled onto the table in her booth. She almost couldn't fit in it. Anyways, this lady downs about 5 plates of Noxie like it is nothing and then goes for the dessert. She tries for the milkshake and boom, out it all comes. When my boss called me out, it looked like she emptied everything she ate that day onto the table. Herself, the person sitting across from her, the wall. You get the picture. My boss tried to make me clean that up and try to pull the lady out of the booth, but I refused to touch that for minimum wage and put in my 2-week notice. We had some weird people come into that place. I hope some people get to read this, seeing as it's really late for this, but I hope those who have enjoyed it. Off topic, but I wish more young kids knew that, when this kind of crap happens, you should just quit the job. It's not like it goes on your permanent record or anything. I should have quit way more jobs as a teenager. I was working at Guitar Center. Drunk guy comes in. He is cool at first and puts a $800 drum set on layaway. After the transaction he starts freaking out and asking if I have a jacket he can have. For some reason he thinks the cops are looking for him. He buys a hat and asks for my shirt. I said heck no. Then he offered me $20 for my white tee. I give him my undershirt. Why the heck not? My manager comes in afterwards and sees his shirt on the ground. I tell her what happened, minus me selling my shirt. She freaks out, calls the cops and the police pick him up in the parking lot. Note to self, if the cops are looking for you, don't do shifty things that make people think that cops are looking for you. On my summers off of college, I used to work at my local Dunkin' Donuts. One day, the owner of the franchise was interviewing a potential manager at the very front of the store, right next to the windows. About halfway through the interview, we all hear an extremely loud crack shatter. When we all look to the front of the store, there was a bullet hole with cracks all around it perfectly placed at the owner's head. Good thing the glass was double paned. As for the potential manager, he immediately got up, ran out, and peeled out of the parking lot. Till 1 pane of glass doesn't block bullets. 2 panes, however, saves lives. I used to work at a country club as a valet. One sunny afternoon, I park a vintage convertible Mercedes coupe in very good condition for a regular member in the middle of a 100-car parking lot, top down. 4 hours later, he comes out and I go down to the parking lot, which is not visible by those waiting for their car, to retrieve his Benz. It's not there. I do 2 full 360s and begin to lose it. I'm sweating. My legs are weak and shaking, and I'm scared beyond belief. I had the keys in my hand, so figured the only thing that could have happened is it was stolen. Who the heck steals a Merc in broad daylight from a country club? On my third 360, I see the car about 200 feet away resting against a pine tree, about 4 feet to the left of a metal fence that was built around the tennis courts. I sprint to the car, jump in, turn it on and back it out of the trees. I then get out and check for any damage. None. I take off my sweater vest and start wiping off the hundreds of pine needles that are all over the car. Luckily there were none inside the car. I drive the car up and the guy goes, "Where the heck did you park the thing?" Hands me my tip, and leaves. Somehow, that Merc dodged every car that was parked in front of it, about 6 columns of spaces but not many cars that afternoon in the lot, and rested peacefully against a pine tree versus a metal fence. And, somehow it managed to do it while not being seen. Otherwise someone would have surely reported it. Phew. My dad called me from my hometown yesterday and told me this exact same story that happened in my local grocery store. I hope this happened in Montana. I'm a college student. My summer job is working for a porta potty company. Last summer one of our pump trucks went down, something with the transmission. It was my job to go pick up party units, porta potties rented for a weekend for outdoor parties etc, using our pickup and trailer. Well, one of these units fell through the cracks with all the confusion. I had the honor of picking it up 3 weeks later. Do you know what happens to crap after it soaks in pee for 3 weeks? It's not pretty, so as I load this sucker up using a special hand truck designed for porta potties, I was lucky enough to have the vent in front of my face. Now I've smelled my fair share of poo in this job, but this was unbearable. The devil wished his crap smelled half as bad as this. Once I got back to the office, we used our good truck to service this unit. It was a solid quarter full of maggots. I promptly vomited and proceeded not to eat for the next 2 days. I was 16, working in a grocery store as a cashier. A teenager ran in the front door, armed with a sawed-off shotgun, looking pee-off and ready to kill. It was a Saturday night, very slow, so I was the only cashier and there were just a few customers. My boss was in the locked customer service kiosk, behind thick glass. The kid pointed the gun at my face and demanded that my boss open the safe. My boss said no. After some fast thinking on my part and some freaking therapy for this screwed up kid, I managed to stay alive and he managed to get away. My boss got 3 weeks off paid vacation for her PTSD. I was back at work the next day. Your boss is a dong. I used to work at Starbucks and a customer came up to me during the evening to tell me that the men's bathroom was a nightmare. Normally these are just customer overreacting to someone who didn't flush or drew some graffiti, so I told him I would take care of it. I walked into the men's room and it was in fact a nightmare. Crap everywhere. Literally. The toilet was full. Crap rising above the seat, on the floor, in the garbage can, toilet paper everywhere. The smell was unbearable. My boss was peeved because I refused to clean it. After some talking, he agreed that he would make some calls and have it taken care of. The next day, it's all clean and I asked how long he had to wait until the crew got there. He said, I didn't call. I just took a garbage bag and gloves and cleaned it myself. TLDR. Someone crap everywhere in the bathroom and my manager cleaned everything up with his hands. Someone crap inside of a boot at the clothing store my friend managed. In a boot. No one found out until another customer went to try on the boot. Over the summer I worked as a bagger at a grocery chain. Usually I hated Saturday mornings because we had too many baggers for enough customers to pay us all. Tips were our only wages. But the man I got was elderly, about 70, and he was chatting to the cashier, happily saying he had gotten the rough draft of his book back. So as I took him out to his car with his groceries, I asked him about it. Apparently, 12 years ago his daughter had been murdered. They were never able to prove it was her husband, but the dad was convinced. His wife had died recently, and when a reporter approached him, asking to write the story of his daughter's death, he decided to take his time and write it instead. We spent 30 minutes talking in the parking lot, with him showing me the proof copy, tears streaming down his face as he showed off the pictures of his only child's life. I don't know if the man is even still alive today, but I don't think I'll ever forget that conversation. A few summers ago I worked at a factory that produced bagged ice. It was a very elaborate and industrial setup. I was working my second or third training day in our bagging room. Here was where the ice was crushed up by giant nasty augers, then funneled into the bags, after which we tied and stacked them onto pallets. The bagging room was connected to what we called the cold room, where were stored the pallets of ice, and other large ice things, like dry ice, and even ice sculptures at one point. During my shift we would load refrigerated trucks for shipping. When that day a bird flew in through the cold room and in the bagging room, and kept on landing on the equipment. In effort to get it out, I watched my 2 supervisors stand on giant stacks of pallets waving tennis rackets and brooms around, trying to swat it down. What did the poor bird in the end though was a well-aimed snowball made from crushed ice around the machines. My co-worker was a pitcher for the school in the area, and nailed the bird square in the face. KO. The thing shat everywhere, including all over the equip the ice would run through. We had to shut down for the day to clean and sanitize everything. I did get to go home early though, so that was kinda cool. I'm a college student, and I perform for various college events as an amateur magician. Most of my gigs are for frat parties, where I get paid $20 an hour and free drinks to entertain. Sometimes my college asks me to do a show for their events. A few times they call me frantically because someone cancelled on them. So one time, my college was the place of a field trip for a bunch of elementary school kids. The motivational speaker had gone on a bender, ironically, and was unavailable to speak to the kids, so my college called me and asked me to entertain the kids until it was time for them to go. So I went there, performed my magic tricks. For those of you who don't know, doing magic for kids is like giving catnip to a cat. They all love it, and there are none of those smartest people who go, "I saw you take the card out." There was this one little girl who was really into my show. Whenever I would ask for a volunteer, her hand would shoot up into the air, and she always zooted and ahed whenever I made something disappear. At the end of the show, when the kids were starting to get on the bus to leave, she came up to me and told me that she was really glad I could show her magic tricks because it reminded her of her brother. Her brother used to do magic tricks for her and had died in a car accident a few months ago. I cried. Worked in a phone store in the middle of a city. Had a rage addict fall asleep on the counter halfway through trying to talk to me. Once I poked him back to consciousness, he walked to the corner of the store, pulled his pants down around his ankles and stood there swaying for several minutes. Called the cops. They found him curled up on a bench outside the store, sleeping on this unsuspecting old dude. I used to work for the Cal's ice cream company. Some of you may have heard of them. They started out in Prince Edward Island and sort of grew from there. Some of the flavors included Wowie Cowie and Gooey Mooey, if either of those ring a bell. Anyways, the ice cream stores used to, possibly still do, sell bottles of and of Green Gables raspberry cordial. The front shelf of the ice cream counter would be lined with 4-pack after 4-pack of the stuff, a thick syrupy pop. At some point they changed the recipe and the new product was much more carbonated. So much so that bottles would sometimes explode and stain our floor a bright red. Because this was a beat to clean up and was, frankly, dangerous, all of the bottles had to be thrown out. Lucky me. On this day it would be my job to first empty all the bottles into the sink downstairs and then throw out the bottles. By the end of my shift my skin was a deep pinkish hue, and I had to take about an hour-long shower to no longer feel sticky. I also had bruises on my palms from twisting the caps all day, some of which exploded off the bottle like a rocket as soon as I began twisting them. Needless to say, I was a little worse for wear that night. It was the best goddamn shift ever. Chemist here. If anything like that happens again, take a moment to alternately pour vinegar or baking soda water on your hands. They'll change colors. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.